Courtrooms, I always thought, feel like abandoned churches. They smell of old wood, stale coffee, and forgotten promises. Light pours through the tall windows and falls across the wooden benches, enough to make anyone sitting there feel small, like a school kid caught cheating. Strange. After 62 years of teaching and living, I never imagined I'd be here, not as a witness to history, but with the label, kidnapper, pinned on me by my own daughter. Melissa's lawyer, a kid really, with slick-back hair that looked like he spent more time in front of the mirror than reading the case file, stood tall. His tie was so bright red, I swear it could blind the judge. He waved his arms like a showman, his voice blasting like a stadium speaker. Your Honor, my client, Melissa Whitaker, has been stripped of her right to be a mother for 15 years. Her two sons were kidnapped by her own father. Mr. Thomas Whitaker, who sits before you today. Kidnapping. The word echoed in the quiet room like a gavel striking wood. I had to bite my lip not to laugh. In my head, one line repeated. I'm being called a kidnapper. Fine. Kidnappers usually ask for ransom. I only ever asked for lunch money and cough syrup. Too bad the FBI never knocked on my door in the past 15 years. I leaned back against the hard bench and felt the familiar ache in my lower back. I used to sit on classroom chairs all day, chalk in hand. Now it was courtroom benches, listening to charges from the very daughter I once held in my arms. History, I always taught my students, repeats itself when people refuse to study the lesson. And here I was, the living proof. Quick introduction. My name is Thomas Whitaker, a retired history teacher from Columbus, Ohio. I stood at the blackboard for nearly 4 decades, teaching kids to separate truth from lies by reading original documents. And now here I sit, using the same skills, except the subjects aren't Abraham Lincoln or the crash of 1929. They're my daughter and her lawyer. Life, it turns out, can be as bitter as burnt coffee. And there she was, Melissa, my only child, 37, dressed in a sleek beige blazer, pencil skirt, and sharp heels. She walked into the courtroom like it was a red carpet event instead of a legal proceeding. Her wavy hair, her frozen smile, her face polished like a counterfeit check. To strangers, she looked like a successful businesswoman. To me, she looked like a script written with makeup and absence. She glanced at me, not as a daughter looks at her father, but as a plaintiff looks at the accused. Cold, calculating, distant. She set her oversized designer bag on the table as if to say, "Look at me. I've made it." I almost laughed. Real success doesn't need a gold logo screaming from the front row. The whispers behind us were impossible to miss. Old neighbors, former colleagues, and the curious. They stared at me like I was tonight's primetime drama. The ratings. I turn to you, the ones watching this video. Let's be honest, where are you right now? Texas? Florida? Maybe some small town where gossip runs faster than the mail? Drop it in the comments, because betrayal smells the same everywhere. Bitter as burnt coffee, sweet as pumpkin pie gone stale. Back in the courtroom, Judge Morrison, hair white as chalk dust, rested his chin on his hand. He tapped his gavel lightly, eyes sharp despite his age, like a man who's seen 100 families rip themselves apart over money. I couldn't guess what he was thinking, but I knew he understood this much. Some arguments sound smooth as jazz, but the closer you listen, the more sour notes you hear. The lawyer kept performing, reciting lines about a mother's pain and sacred rights torn away. I remembered clearly the last time Melissa visited her boys, or to be precise, the last time she came asking for money. That was 9 years ago. She stayed 3 days and left the moment I filled the fridge. Yet here she sat in her blazer armor, demanding her maternal rights. I stayed silent. My hand rested on a battered manila envelope in my lap. Its edges frayed, its folds worn thin. 15 years of photographs, doctor bills, museum permission slips. Every record stacked neatly inside. Not shiny, not expensive. But the only thing in this room carrying the weight of truth. Ironic, isn't it? Melissa had her lawyer, her blazer, and her designer purse. I had a tattered envelope. But I knew which one could cut deeper. the real blade between lies and truth. I pressed my finger against the paper's edge, hearing the faint rustle. That was the sound of 15 years. Sleepless nights in hospital rooms, rushed mornings signing insurance forms, winters where I chose between buying the boys' coats or paying the heating bill. A line I once taught my students came back to me. History is not what people say. It's what gets written down. I smiled to myself. This time, the history of my family was written in my signature on every sheet in that envelope. So when the young lawyer finished his Broadway-style monologue, I knew the real show was about to start. Because I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to explain. All I needed was to open the envelope. You see, I whispered, not just to the court, but to you watching now. This is the only thing strong enough to break the script Melissa and her lawyer built. A battered manila envelope, holding the truth of what it really means to be a father. Twice over. 15 years ago, the day Melissa walked out burned into my memory like ink bleeding across old paper. She stepped out of our small apartment carrying a red suitcase and a smile I knew was meant for the man waiting downstairs. A shiny Lexus sat at the curb, a businessman in an expensive suit leaning to open the door for her. People called him successful. I saw nothing but a good-looking wallet with an empty head, the kind of man who knew how to knot a tie, but not how to change a diaper. Melissa never turned back to hug her boys. Ethan was 3, Caleb not yet 2. They were sitting on the living room floor building with blocks, unaware their mother had chosen a suitcase over them. I stood there, one arm holding Caleb, the other keeping Ethan from running after her, and watched my daughter vanish like a cutscene in a movie. I wasn't a man who cried easily, but that night, when the door slammed shut, my heart dropped like a piece of chalk shattering on the classroom floor. My wife Helen had died of cancer 2 years earlier, leaving a hollow in our home I still hadn't learned to live with. And now my daughter was gone too, leaving behind 2 children. Just like that, I, Thomas Whitaker, high school history teacher, paycheck barely enough to scrape by, was drafted into the role of dad, round 2. That first night was pure hell. Ethan screamed "Mommy" until his voice gave out, while Caleb cried so hard his eyes swelled and his nose ran raw. I sat in the living room, rocking one in my arms while keeping the other close, repeating the same line over and over. Dad's here. Well, technically Grandpa, but let's not get picky. It sounded pathetic, even absurd, but somehow it worked. Eventually, both boys passed out in my arms, and I nodded off on the old sofa, neck aching like I just played a full-court game of basketball. I told myself tomorrow would be better. But the next morning they were both up at 5, screaming for milk. That was when I realized. Number. Tomorrow wasn't going to be easier. No day would be. People say children need a mother's love. What they really need is someone who remembers to buy milk on time. Kids will take milk over life philosophy any day. I found myself at a 24-hour store before dawn, standing in line behind a drunk buying more beer, hauling home 2 cartons of milk like I was feeding a basketball team. In reality, it was just 2 little boys and an old man relearning fatherhood from scratch. I still remember the first days at preschool. Teachers asked for birth certificates, vaccination records, legal guardianship papers. I shoved everything into their hands, my shaky signature sprawled across every form. At first it felt awkward. Later it became routine. Every line that required a parent or guardian's signature, I signed without hesitation. Like I was writing a memoir in blue ink, each stroke proof that I hadn't walked away. A high school teacher's salary was never much. I took on evening graded papers for another school. Even wrote a few local history articles for the paper to make ends meet. Some months I had to choose between fixing the roof and buying antibiotics for Caleb. I always chose the medicine. A roof could be patched with a tarp. A child's cough couldn't wait. I lived 2 lives. By day, I was the teacher, chalk on my hands. By night, I was dad and mom rolled into one. I packed Ethan's lunch with leftover chicken and cold rice. I changed Caleb's diapers, stumbling through the bathroom like I was trying ballet for beginners. And when they finally fell asleep, I sat at the table stacking paperwork into neat piles. In the back of my mind, I knew one day Melissa might return. I wanted the full record ready, proof that I hadn't run. Once, when Ethan was 4, he looked up and asked, "Dad, where's Mommy?" "She's busy," I said. He thought for a moment, then whispered, "Busy too long." My chest tightened. I patted his head. "Yeah, but Dad's here." He smiled faintly. From then on, Grandpa became Dad in their mouths. At first it sounded strange, then familiar, then true. A colleague once joked in the teacher's lounge, "Planning to be a babysitter forever?" I smiled. "Babysitters get paid. I don't, but I get hugs and shirt stains instead." Their laughter turned awkward, and I knew the truth. It was the one job I'd never quit. The hardest part wasn't the money, it was the nights. Once Ethan spiked a fever. I held him in the ER for 10 hours on a plastic chair. Caleb clung to my shirt, terrified of doctors, gripping me like I was the only anchor in the storm. I was exhausted, but when Ethan opened his eyes and whispered, "Dad," I knew I'd been promoted for real. To me, every paper became proof I hadn't run. I labeled them, stored them, slid them into manila envelopes. They weren't just documents. They were a family history written in shaky but stubborn pen strokes. One day, I thought, the boys would need the truth, and those envelopes would answer for me. Of course, it wasn't all bleak. There were moments of light. Caleb wobbling on his bike, scraping his knees but laughing through the blood. Ethan bursting through the door waving a best reader certificate. Moments like those reminded me I wasn't a substitute. I was the real thing. Still, late at night, doubts crept in. Was I wrecking my own life for Melissa's mistakes? At my age, I should have been planning retirement, fishing, reading, not waking at 3 in the morning to calm nightmares. Maybe so, but if I had to choose again, I'd still do it. The neighborhood knew me as the teacher who became Dad again. Some pitied, some mocked. A neighbor once told me, "You're remarkable." I shrugged. Not remarkable, just not the type to run. And I knew if I ever ran, I wouldn't be myself anymore. So the days rolled on. From a high school teacher with a thin paycheck, I became a man who learned to cook porridge, sew buttons, grade still prep lectures on the Civil War. I lived 2 lives at once. One teaching others to study history's lessons. One learning my own lessons about love and responsibility. Melissa disappeared, but the boys were real. Their hugs, their meals, their school forms. They made me a father again, not by choice, but by fate. Looking back, I don't see myself as a victim. I see myself as the man holding the lantern, lighting the path for 2 boys through the dark. And I know, if Melissa ever comes back, the manila envelope will tell it all. That I stayed, that I didn't run, and that I became a true father, even if all they ever called me was Grandpa. People often say time flies when you're busy. If that's true, then the last 15 years have been the longest blink of my life. One blink filled with hundreds of signatures, thousands of graded papers, stacks of hospital bills, and countless photos, all tucked inside a battered manila envelope, the kind you'd expect to hold student reports, but that became the real safe of my family. I remember when Ethan was 5 and hospitalized with pneumonia. I sat all night on a freezing plastic chair, arm numb from holding him still. Every time he opened his eyes and whispered, "Dad," it felt like I was given another lungful of oxygen. No doctor needed to tell me. From that moment on, Grandpa had been promoted. I was Dad, not by blood, but by cold compresses pressed to a fevered forehead and sleepless nights endured without complaint. Caleb was different, stronger, but stubborn. I'll never forget the high school basketball championship when he was 16. The game was held in an old gym with a leaky roof. I sat among screaming students, clutching a hand-drawn sign that said, "Go, Caleb!" He made the winning shot in the final seconds. The bleachers erupted, and I jumped to my feet, yelling until my throat burned. When he lifted the trophy, his eyes scanned the crowd until they found me. He raised it high and shouted, "This is for you, Dad." The kids around me looked like I had just turned into Rocky Balboa. I only smiled. The trophy was plastic. My real victory had been won over 15 long years. Don't mistake me for a superhero. I fell asleep grading papers, dug through couch cushions for enough change to pay the electric bill, and even considered selling Helen's old car to cover prescriptions. But one thing I never forgot: showing up. I was there. Through rain-soaked parent-teacher nights, jam-packed graduations, and even the evening I drove 50 miles after a full day of teaching just to see Caleb play in a semifinal. His team lost, but he saw me waving from the stands. Sometimes winning doesn't matter. What matters is being seen. That envelope became my silent companion. Inside, no gold, no jewels. Only what most people would call trash: hospital bills, field trip forms, parent-teacher notices, even an unused lunch slip. To me, they were the only investments worth making. Some people save money in a vault. I save permission slips for museum trips. That's what pays dividends 15 years later. I joked about it when neighbors asked what I managed to save. They laughed, thinking I was being funny. I wasn't. I meant every word. One day I knew those crumpled papers would be worth more than any savings account. Once, while sorting papers, I found the form authorizing Ethan's emergency appendectomy. My signature was shaky, blurred by sweat dripping onto the page. Without it, Ethan might not be here studying for college exams. I stared at that form for hours, not because it looked good, but because it was signed at the right moment. That's the job of a father. Those years taught me humor, too. When Ethan was in 5th grade, he wrote an essay titled, "My Hero." I figured it would be some Marvel character. Instead, he wrote, "My dad, Thomas Whitaker, because he always shows up." I nearly cried. Out loud, I only said, "Next time, remember to add that Dad makes a mean spaghetti." Eventually, both boys called me Dad without hesitation. At first, it sounded like a game, like pretend. But over time, it became real. At the dinner table, on the basketball court, in the middle of the night when they were sick, it was always Dad. And each time they said it, another layer of cement sealed my heart solid. Of course, life wasn't all laughter. When the heater broke, I kept the gas burners running through the night. Summers, when there wasn't money for vacations, I took them to the town park for ice cream cones. Oddly enough, those are the memories they love most. Caleb once said, "Dad, remember when the ice cream melted all over my shirt? Best day ever." I laughed. "Son, that was the day I got the biggest dry cleaning bill of my life." I won't deny, there were nights I lay awake wondering where Melissa was. But then I'd hear Caleb's gentle snore, or Ethan murmuring Dad in his sleep, and I knew the answer didn't matter. The ones who needed me were here. The one who left was just a shadow. Looking back over 15 years, I don't feel older. I feel forged. Each paper in that envelope is a brick in the house we built together. Not a fancy house, not a polished one, but strong enough that no lawyer's speech could shake it. So today, standing in court with my hand on that envelope, I know its worth. It isn't clutter. It's a 15-year record proving one simple truth: I was there. And while Melissa may flaunt her expensive blazer and her lawyer's voice, I hold the one thing she can never borrow: a history written in the presence. I used to tell my students that history isn't promises spoken, it's events recorded. Now, I am the living proof, and the manila envelope in my hands is the textbook my daughter will never want to read. Some mornings seem ordinary until the door opens, and the past storms in like a thundercloud that never died. That day, I was sitting on the porch, sipping bitter coffee, watching Caleb and Ethan rake leaves in the backyard. Ohio's autumn had painted the ground gold, and I thought I could enjoy 5 quiet minutes. Then I heard the sharp tap of heels on the walkway, each strike like a drum roll for a song no one asked for. I looked up and saw Melissa. 15 years had passed. Her brown hair was now salon-colored, styled in glossy waves straight out of a shampoo ad. Her heels clicked on the cement as if she were leading an orchestra of pretense. Pencil skirt, tailored blazer, oversized designer purse pressed to her side. She looked more like a businesswoman stepping off a magazine cover than a mother returning to her children. And the first words out of her mouth? Not "Dad, how are you?" No, I'm sorry. Not even, "How are the boys?" She glanced around with eyes cold as an airport scanner and asked, "Where are they?" I nearly choked on my coffee. 15 years without a call, a birthday card, a single word, and she reappeared, asking like she'd only been gone since yesterday. I leaned on the chair, looked her over, and kept quiet. In my head, I smirked. A daughter gone 15 years returns like a late Amazon delivery. Only she wasn't carrying a package, just a lawsuit. Ethan came from the backyard, tall and solid, his dark eyes like his mother's but harder. Caleb followed, hair messy, broom still in hand. They froze at the sight of the woman at the door. Ethan frowned. Caleb even stepped back. I saw the question in their eyes. Who is this? A stranger? Or some half-remembered shadow made flesh? Melissa opened her arms, her smile forced. "Kids, it's me, Mom." Ethan didn't move. Caleb looked at me, waiting for confirmation. I stayed silent, arms crossed, letting the moment speak. This woman was a stranger, 15 years too late. Dad. Melissa turned to me, a hint of reproach in her voice. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" I answered slowly. "I thought you assumed everyone would know who you are." The air thickened. Melissa cleared her throat and turned back to the boys. "I've come back. I'll take care of you now." Ethan laughed, sharp and bitter, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Caleb pressed his lips together and walked inside. No hugs. No, "Mom, I missed you." Just silence. The kind that opens like a canyon. That night after she left, I sat in the living room, yellow lamplight stretching shadows across the wall. I wasn't surprised. I'd run this scenario in my mind many times. What struck me was the timing. Why now? Not a year ago. Not 10 years ago. Why now? Just as Ethan was turning 18 and Caleb was nearly grown. I dug through my papers, opened the manila envelope, and found the insurance documents. 18. Amount: $1.5 million. Beneficiary by default. The mother is still the legal guardian. I leaned back and let out a dry laugh. So it wasn't motherly love that woke after 15 years. It was the alarm clock at the bank. Melissa's timing wasn't an accident. It was perfect. Not for love, not for guilt, for money. That was always her gift, knowing when to show up for her wallet, never for someone's heart. I chose silence. No yelling, no slamming doors. I would watch. People who talk too much always reveal themselves. I would let Melissa tighten her own noose. Weeks later, the summons came, just as I expected. She hadn't returned to talk. She had returned to sue for the kidnapping of her own children. I read the complaint and smirked. If there were a charge for volunteering as an unpaid father for 15 years, I'd plead guilty on the spot. I slid the papers into the manila envelope. It was bulging now, not just with doctor bills and school slips, but with evidence of a legal farce. Ethan and Caleb reacted differently. Ethan punched the wall. "She has no right." Caleb sat quietly, picking at the threads on his sleeve, then whispered, "What if the court makes us go, Dad?" I swallowed hard and answered, "There are things no court can force. One of them is the truth. And if the truth is on our side, we're not going anywhere." Inside, I knew the real fight had just begun. Melissa hadn't come back to be a mother. She came to collect. If she wanted the courtroom to be her stage, so be it. I already had my prop. A battered manila envelope holding 15 years of proof, and her. She had only a hollow script, a handful of lies, and a dream of $1.5 million. I sat in that living room, watching the boys, my boys, no longer just grandsons, and thought, all right, Melissa, you picked the perfect time to come back, and you're going to regret choosing me as your opponent. The courtroom that day was packed like a classroom on pop quiz morning. Every bench filled, curious neighbors, distant relatives, even a few of my former colleagues, come to see if old man Whitaker would really be branded a kidnapper of his own grandsons. Most retirees brag about golf scores. Me? I got accused of felony parenting. Everyone has their hobbies. Melissa's lawyer, the slick-haired kid with the blinding red tie, shot up like a Broadway actor hitting his cue. His voice boomed. "Your Honor, My client suffered postpartum depression, compounded by years of addiction. She needed time to recover, time away. But that does not erase the sacred rights of a mother. I nearly raised my hand. Excuse me, but if that's called a leave of absence, it's a world record. 15 years. I've never seen anyone keep a job after being absent that long. Melissa sat there, dabbing at rehearsed tears, bowing her head just so. Even her crying looked choreographed. I thought, the Oscars ought to add a category. Best Actress in the Role of the Vanished Mother. Judge Morrison, sharp despite the years, listened without a flicker beyond adjusting his glasses. He'd seen plenty of plays in his day, but this one smelled different. Smelled like money. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, back aching, but my voice steady. No need to shout. Sometimes truth whispered cuts deeper than lies shouted. Your Honor, I have a few things to present. I opened the manila envelope. The room seemed to hold its breath. No gold, no jewels, just paper, my treasure. First, Ethan's first day of kindergarten photo. Backpack twice his size, grin wider still. On the back, the school registration form, parent/guardian signed, Thomas Whitaker. Next, the surgical consent for Caleb's broken arm. I remembered that night, my hands shaking, sweat blotting the ink as I signed. Without it, the surgery wouldn't have happened in time. Then a stack of parent-teacher notices, everyone signed by me. Pages yellowed, edges folded, but my writing is still clear. I laid them down one by one, slow and deliberate, like a teacher handing back exams. Every eye followed. Mr. Whitaker, Judge Morrison asked, how many times does the mother's name appear in these records? I looked him in the eye. Never. The room rippled. Gasps, whispers. Melissa's lawyer squirmed, ready to interrupt, but the judge raised his hand for silence. I went on, voice even. For 15 years, whenever the hospital needed a signature, they called me. Whenever the school needed a parent, they called me. Every winter night when fevers spiked, the boys called Dad. And that was me. I did not kidnap. I showed up. The one who vanished, Your Honor, was their mother. I turned to see Ethan and Caleb in the back row, their faces tight, eyes blazing. This moment weighed more on them than any test they'd ever taken. 15 years of records. Melissa bowed her head, lips trembling. I was sick. I couldn't send a birthday card, couldn't sign a school form, couldn't make a phone call. His tone was calm, but steel ran under it. The silence pressed down until even the hum of the heater grew loud. Then the unexpected happened. Ethan stood, broad shoulders, voice deeper than his age. He faced the judge, not his mother. Your Honor, he said, we don't really know her. 6 words, a hammer strike. Melissa flinched. Her lawyer dropped his gaze. Caleb, sitting beside his brother, nodded and clasped his hand tight. The air froze. I stood there, the envelope open, papers spread. No fiery speeches, no complicated defense. Just 6 words from the boy she left behind. I looked at my son, yes, my son, and my throat caught. 15 years of bills, forms, and sleepless nights had funneled into this one moment. The moment truth stood tall and spoke for me. The hearing wasn't over, but I knew the fight had already tipped. Not because I had won, but because Melissa had already lost. I didn't choose Rosewood Cafe by accident. Back in high school, Melissa used to sit in the corner there, working on math homework while I graded papers. The smell of roasted beans, the clink of cups, the soft yellow light. It all held both memory and truth. I wanted Melissa to remember. Before she learned to run, this place had been her anchor. And now, it would be the stage for her final act. I arrived early, ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and sat at the old table by the window where the light cut across just right to catch every flicker of expression on the face opposite me. At exactly 2 o'clock, I heard the click of heels on wood. Melissa walked in, cream coat fitted, hair in glossy waves, makeup flawless. She dropped into the chair across from me, slamming her designer bag onto the table like it was the last proof she had left of herself. I glanced at it, smirked. Nice. Does it come with a 15-year warranty on motherly love? Her brow lifted. I came here to talk, not to hear sarcasm. Good, because sarcasm is about the cheapest thing I can still afford. I leaned back, sipped my coffee. So, what's the pitch? Another lawsuit. You cost me my kids, Melissa said, voice shaky, eyes darting around the cafe. But if you step aside, we can settle this quietly. I just want what's mine. What's yours? You mean 15 years of absence? Or do you mean the 1.5 million in insurance? I opened my case, slid a folder onto the table, and spread it slowly like a winning hand in poker. Her eyes locked on it. I slid each sheet across the polished wood. Credit card statements drowning in interest, past due car payments, overdraft notices. Each page landed like a funeral bell tolling for her facade. How did you get, she stammered. I know a private investigator, paid with my pension, worth every dime. I laid down the final sheet. And here's the kicker. Your husband, Robert Hastings, is under federal investigation for money laundering and tax fraud. I hear the FBI likes coffee. Wouldn't surprise me if they stopped by Rosewood someday. Her face drained of color. She clutched the purse strap so hard her nails dug into her skin. Dad, you can't. I can. I leaned forward, voice low and sharp. And you know I will if I have to. The cafe buzzed on, spoons against cups. A couple is laughing at the next table, all of it clashing against the silence at ours. Melissa bit her lip, trying to gather composure. Do you think the court will take this seriously? I'm still their legal mother. Number. You're the one who left. I've got a mountain of papers proving it, and now I've got a motive. You didn't come back for your kids. You came back for cash. Once I lay this out, the court and the press will shred your mask. Her eyes flashed anger. You're destroying me. I chuckled. No, Melissa, you destroyed yourself. I'm just holding up like it could shield her. But her eyes betrayed her. Panic leaked through the makeup. I straightened, letting every word drop heavy. This is it. You'll withdraw the lawsuit. You'll leave Ohio, and you'll leave the boys alone. Otherwise, I'll open the envelope for everyone to see. Debts. A husband under investigation. 15 years gone. All of it. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her voice was dead in her throat. I knew then. The battle was over. No court, no lawyer. Just the stare of a father with nothing left to lose but his sons. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the manila envelope. When I looked up, Melissa's eyes shimmered with tears. But I knew better. Not tears of regret. Just the tears of someone watching a sandcastle collapse under the tide. I rose, left money on the table. Melissa, I said slowly, you had 15 years to be a mother. Time's up. I walked out. Her heels no longer clicked with confidence. They stuttered, offbeat, like the lies she'd lived on too long. The cold wind stung my face on the way home, but my chest felt lighter. The coffee wasn't good. The justice was. And I knew, whatever Melissa said or shouted or cried after that, the fear in her eyes had already told the whole story. The phone rang at 7 in the morning. I had just poured my first cup of coffee, not even sat down yet. A woman's voice came through the line, crisp and direct. Mr. Whitaker, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Columbus Police Department. I need to inform you that your daughter, Melissa Hastings, and her husband, Robert Hastings, were arrested last night on charges of financial fraud, money laundering, and federal tax evasion. They are currently in custody awaiting trial. I set the cup down slowly. No surprise, no shock. It felt the same as when a student misses the exact problem I had warned about on the board. The result was inevitable. I understand, I said. Thank you for letting me know. After hanging up, I sat still, watching the morning light spill through the window. Outside, Ethan was practicing free throws. Caleb wheeled his bike out for school. Just another ordinary morning, except their mother now wore an orange jumpsuit. I took a deep breath and called them into the living room. Same old sofa, same scratched coffee table, same wall of framed photos from kindergarten through high school. Only the air was heavier. When they sat down, I looked them both in the eye. Your mother was arrested last night. Silence. Ethan stared at me, his eyes darkening. Caleb blinked hard, then looked at the floor. Neither asked why. Neither asked if there had been a mistake. They'd lived long enough to know. Mistakes didn't explain Melissa. Choices did. Ethan broke the quiet first. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "It's not difficult. It's clarifying." I froze for a beat. 6 words, sharp as a blade. No hate, no drama, just truth. I smiled bitterly, nodding. Exactly, son. Sometimes justice isn't complicated. It's 2 plus 2 equals. Mom chose money. Caleb lifted his head, eyes wet but no tears. I think we've known this for a long time. It just feels real now. I set my hand on his shoulder. That's right. Sometimes, truth doesn't need a judge or jury. It shows itself when someone backs into their own corner. Ethan gave a short, humorless laugh. I bet she'll try calling from prison. Probably bargain with us for a lawyer. Maybe, I said, but this time she has nothing left to trade. You can fake being a mother. You can fake regret. But you can't fake it when the FBI puts charges in your face. Caleb leaned back, sighing. So what now, Dad? We just keep going. Exactly. We eat breakfast. We go to school. You do your homework. You play ball. Your lives don't stop because your mother was arrested. Remember this. It's her guilt, not yours. I looked at them, both taller than me now, and my chest was torn in two. Relief, because the loop was finally closed. Pain, because no father wants to say the words, "Your mother was arrested." But love sometimes means handing over the scalpel to cut out the tumor. That afternoon, while driving Caleb to practice, Melissa Hastings were arrested in a sweeping federal investigation. I reached to turn it off, but Caleb said, "It's okay, Dad, leave it on. I want to hear what the world is calling her." I gripped the wheel, silent. Outside, the October sky was raw, red maple leaves falling like drops of blood. Inside me, something cracked and sealed at the same time. That night at dinner, Ethan ate in silence. Caleb pushed food around his plate, and I poured water into our glasses. Finally, Ethan looked up, straight at me. "Dad, she'll never change, will she?" I answered honestly. "Number. Some people do, but your mother chose her road too long ago. When you trade love for money, there's no way back." Caleb sighed. "I just regret that we have nothing to regret." The words hit hard. No child should have to say that about their mother. But it was true. And sometimes, truth is harsher than any sentence. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I opened the manila envelope. I slid inside a printed news article about Melissa's arrest. The stack was thick now. Our family's entire story. Not a novel, not a script, just a record of choices. One side choosing to show up, the other choosing to disappear. I folded the flap shut, tucked it in the drawer, and let out a low laugh. Not joy, irony. Melissa always thought she was the clever one, chasing men with fat wallets and bigger dreams. And me, the broke history teacher, left with 2 boys and an old envelope. But now, who really won? The next day, on the court, Ethan sank a clean shot. Swish. He turned, smiling. "Dad, it really is clarifying. We know who's here and who's not." I nodded, smiling back. "That's right, son. And that's the best history lesson you'll ever learn. Not from a book, from your own family." On the day Ethan turned 18, with Caleb not far behind, the manila envelope I had carried like a shield all those years suddenly felt lighter. Not because its worth had faded, truth never fades, but because another document had taken center stage. The life insurance payout from their father. The very sum Melissa had chased so desperately that she came back with lawsuits in hand. $1.5 million. Printed in cold black ink. Some people would see that number and dream of yachts, sports cars, and vacations in the Caribbean. Ethan and Caleb didn't. Instead, they took me to a quiet house in the suburbs, a place with a wide porch and an old oak tree shading the front yard. "Dad," Ethan began, "we want you to see this." I stood before the house, the air smelling of fresh paint, the windows gleaming in the morning sun. Caleb opened the door and led me into a dining room with a long oak table, big enough for 3 men, and maybe, someday, their own families. "We bought it," Ethan said. "Not just for us, for you too. This is our home." I let out a crooked smile, half moved, half mocking myself. "You really think I need another mortgage weighing me down?" Caleb shook his head steady. "Paid in full. No mortgage, no debt." I froze. In that moment, I saw they weren't boys anymore. They were men. Men who could plan, who could provide, and most of all, who understood the sacrifice that had carried them this far. They showed me around each room. A living room bathed in sunlight. A small bedroom for me, with shelves wide enough for my old maps and history books. Even a work nook where I could pin up those faded classroom posters. The kitchen had space for all three of us to cook without bumping shoulders. A far cry from the cramped galley where I once fumbled with spaghetti and toddlers. Ethan turned, his gaze steady. "We made one more decision," Caleb added. "From now on, we're Whitakers." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I laughed out loud. "Are you sure? Whitaker's not glamorous. Doesn't have the shine of Hastings. Honestly, it sounds a little small town." Ethan shrugged. "We don't need glamour, we need real. And this name has been here for 15 years. It didn't vanish and come back asking for money." I nodded, pride mixing with bitter humor. Whitaker isn't rich, but at least it never disappeared for 15 years, only to knock on the bank's door. They laughed, and I laughed with them. A laugh of release, like river ice cracking at the end of winter. That evening, the three of us gathered around the new oak table. Caleb cooked stew, Ethan tossed salad, and I played quality control, my lifelong profession. The room filled with laughter, the clink of dishes, and the warm smell of garlic and thyme. I looked around and saw everything Melissa had forever lost. 2 sons are joking, their eyes full of gratitude. A table heavy with food and belonging. A home no designer blazer could ever buy. No lawyer could ever argue into existence. Just 3 men and a table, the truest wealth I had ever known. And in that moment, I realized legacy isn't money left behind. It's a name, a table, and dinners shared. Ethan and Caleb had chosen Whitaker. That meant my legacy would live on, not in bank statements, but in memory, in responsibility, in presence. I raised my glass, meeting their eyes. "To Whitaker," I said. A name not flashy, but stronger than any promise. 2 glasses touched mine, a clear ring in the air, sharp and final as a period closing a stormy chapter. That night, I sat on the porch of our new home, watching the moon rise. No bitterness, only peace. Melissa could drown in courts and prisons, but here, in this house, a family had been reborn. A family called Whitaker. And that was the only new legacy that mattered. I am 63, sitting in the new kitchen. Morning light pours through the window onto the wide oak table Ethan and Caleb picked for us. The small TV on the counter drones with the morning news. Defendant Melissa Hastings, 38, was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for financial fraud and money laundering. She will serve her term at a federal facility. The anchor's voice is flat, no drama, like reading baseball scores in the off-season. I listen and feel no triumph, no glee, just a heavy sigh. People imagine justice as a drum roll, a grand curtain fall. In truth, justice is paperwork, patience, and just enough sarcasm to keep yourself awake. Justice isn't loud. It's paperwork, patience, and a little sarcasm. I click the TV off. Silence returns. On the wall above the table hangs a fresh photo. 3 men standing together on the porch. Ethan, 18, broad-shouldered, his eyes sharp. Caleb, just stepping into adulthood, grinning with a spark of mischief. And me, a graying teacher, standing between them as if this had always been home. They call me Dad now, not Grandpa. At first it startled me. Now, every time the word rings out, it fills the hollow of those 15 years. Ethan says it when he needs advice before an exam. Caleb says it when he burns noodles in the pan. Dad. 2 simple letters, the only medal I'll ever care to wear, earned by trading my retirement for fatherhood. I rise, pull plates from the cabinet. The table is big enough for guests, but tonight it's just us 3. I set each plate down with hands that know the rhythm by heart, preparing dinner for 2 sons. Not a glorious job, but the only victory that matters. Before pouring water, I turn outward. To you. Yes, you out there, listening to an old man ramble. Be honest. If you've ever carried the weight after your child ran out, share your story in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Ohio, New York, or some small town where family drama feels like the national sport. And if you believe truth and silence are the most elegant revenge, hit subscribe, ring the bell. I've got more stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. I straighten the tablecloth, line up the silverware. Outside, Ethan and Caleb laugh, the basketball thumping on the patio in steady rhythm, the heartbeat of this new house. I smile and shake my head. Melissa will never hear those sounds, never sit at this table, never know that quiet victory looks like a family dinner, like the word dad, spoken without hesitation, like 2 boys grown into men. Justice has been served. Cold, quiet, but complete.